In this container home, we did some really unique interior framing to maximize the interior width inside the container home. It did take a lot of extra effort and some additional costs. So in this video, I'm going to break down for you guys if it was really worth it. Now, when it comes to framing out the interior of a container home, there are a few different options. We have a whole video that we just did recently talking through some of those different options and how we did this unit. You can go with something like an InsoFast, which is a pre-made insulated panel with furring strips. You can go with metal stud framing. You can go with wood stud framing. And traditionally, when we're building out container homes, we're using wood studs. We're using 2x4s. Now, this is a piece of a 2x4, but I want to use it as a demonstration. So typically when we're framing, our 2x4 is going a traditional way, just like most traditional construction would be. This goes almost up to the corrugation. There's usually like a 3/8 inch gap, and that's some additional space where spray foam can get behind it. So with this client, they really wanted to maximize their interior space. Because of that, instead of putting the studs the traditional way, we actually put them flat. Now, when you do this, you're gonna need a way to secure it to the container. So what we did, which you'll see in the previous video, is we added metal strapping at 3 different points and used wood to metal self tappers to attach it. Now, by doing this, it did increase our interior width by a total of 4 inches. And in a container home that's normally 83 inches or just under 7 feet, 4 inches can make a big difference. And so what I want to do is share with you first the difference that made on the interior. And then I want to break down for you some of the additional costs that went along with framing it out that way so that you can decide if it's really worth it. So if I was just walking into this container home and looking at it, I wouldn't be able to tell right off the bat that it was a little bit wider. Now, the areas where you can tell that it's a little bit wider are typically when it's coming to your sleeping areas. So right here, we have a sofa Murphy bed. Now, usually when we're doing a Murphy bed in a container home, we're having the bed go horizontally and it folds down basically long ways. And part of that reason is the interior width is pretty narrow on a container. Now, this client did request that their bed be vertical. And this would not have been an option had we not had an extra 4 inches on the interior of this space. So this bed now is able to fold down. When it's fully folded, it's about 1 inch from the wall. And there's gonna be a little cubby here that's gonna rest on. So it does allow you to do something unique like that, where maybe it allows you to now save a little bit of space in this area. The other one is the bedrooms. We'll take a look at the bedroom here. So in the bedroom, they wanted to do a queen bed centered on the back wall with nightstands on each side. Now, with traditional framing, that would have been impossible. There just wasn't really a way to do that. Usually when it's traditional framing, you'll take a queen bed, you'll offset it to one side, and you'll have about 15, 16 inches on the right-hand side where you could put your nightstand. And that can work. That's not a bad way of doing things, but they really wanted to be able to walk down both sides of the bed. The only other way we see people do it is they take their queen bed and they run it horizontally this way, and it fits in very snug. Now, because we gained the extra 4 inches of this space, we now are able to have about 10 to 12 inches on each side for a nightstand. So given this client's objectives and their goals for the space, maximizing basically the interior by doing this unique form of framing really made sense for them. So there is one more space that was impacted by basically doing smaller framing method, and that's the bathroom. So even right here, these walls, all the partition walls were actually framed with 2x4s and 2x3s going flat. So these walls would traditionally be about 1.5 inches wider. If we had not done this, this bathroom would be about probably 2 to 3 inches smaller. This hallway would have also been about 2 to 3 inches smaller. So by going with that flat framing, it did open up the space a bit. But the question becomes, is it worth it? I mean, the truth is we have models just like this that are built with traditional framing, 2x4s going this direction, and we still are able to have a comfortable bathroom here. And in my opinion, we can still have a comfortable bedroom space back there. And when you start to weigh kind of the pros and the cons of doing this, one of the biggest challenges with doing the flat studs against the wall is the additional costs that go into that. So we'll break that down now. So here's some of the additional costs that were incurred by doing it this way. First, has to do with how we attach the wood to the container. I mentioned that we ran metal straps at 3 different points, then we screwed in the wood in this direction. Well, the additional cost for that was the metal strapping. It was basically 1 inch metal strapping that was 20 feet long and about 1/8 of an inch wide. And for all the pieces that we needed for this unit in particular, it was probably around $350. It's also required us having a welder here on site welding all of those pieces in. That took probably at least a day for him to do. So you can budget another $500 for that material. Then we had to have the wood to metal self-tapping screws. So all in, just for that aspect of the framing, was probably about an additional $1,000. Now, it did take us more time as well. Usually when we're doing framing, we can just create the frames very quickly, get them installed into the container, and we have other videos that show how we do that. But with this method, we had to literally pre-drill each of the pieces of wood with the metal, then put the self-tapping screws into them. It just took long, you know, so just the framing process itself did take longer doing it this way. Now, it also affected some of the upcoming trades after it. Now, at this stage, there isn't a whole lot that it affected when you're getting towards finish work, but at the rough end stage, it definitely impacted electrical. Now, one of the biggest challenges is most electrical boxes, they have a decent amount of width to them. However, because we were putting the studs this direction, we only had about 1.5 inches of play. This meant that we had to go with shallow boxes. Now, shallow boxes were more expensive, and just the installation process of them and trying to make sure everything stayed so they didn't pop out too much off the actual finished shiplap required more time, required more effort. Things like here where it's, you know, a 4-gang box is something that you can find really easily at a Home Depot for traditional stud framing. Once you need it to be a shallow box, not something that's really out there because most people don't need that. And so we ended up increasing our budget on electrical probably by 50%. You know, these boxes, which with traditional framing might be like $1, were closer to $10. And so every time there's an outlet, you're basically adding an additional $10 just for the labor and material to get that installed. So something to keep in mind, electrical was a little bit more challenging. If you were to ask our electrician, he would have said, don't do this again. But that's okay, you still can do it, it's just more work for that trade in particular. There was one more trade that it impacted, and that was insulation. So with a traditional stud going this direction, you have about a comfortable 4 inches to install your closed cell spray foam. With this unit, we still wanted to achieve about a 2 to 2.5 inch depth for the closed cell spray foam. So we literally had to spray our foam with the goal of it basically being flush with the stud. Now, if you've ever installed spray foam before, it's not that easy to just spray it and have it end perfectly with a stud. So what ultimately happened is a lot of that spray foam went past the stud, and then we had to come back through after the foam was done and clean up all of those studs so that the spray foam didn't stick out too far. Now, when you take all of that into account, there just is a lot more time and additional costs to doing it this way. So I think at the end of the day, it comes down to a personal preference. If you are really committed to and sold on the fact that, man, you want a queen size bed in the back and you want to be able to have the ability to walk down both sides, you want the vertical Murphy bed that can fold all the way down, no problem at all, and you feel like you can see the difference, then for you, I would say, okay, that's great, go for it. I would say for me, my personal opinion is I would stick with just traditional framing. It's a lot easier. Your walls are a lot sturdier, especially when you get to the partition walls. And it just has a domino effect of making your future trades after that a lot simpler. So your electrical, your insulation, even when it comes to how you attach your wires. You know, usually you want to have your wires inset off the wall. Well, when you only have 1.5 inches, there's not a whole lot of insetting you can do on wires. Same with water lines for your plumbing. Even running your drain lines gets pretty interesting. So I say that to say, in my opinion, I would say stick with traditional framing, especially if it's your first build. But for those of you that you really want to maximize the interior space, it can be done. And for the details on how to do it, make sure you check out our other video on framing. Well, hope you enjoyed this breakdown of framing, the pros and cons. Was it worth it? If you're a DIYer and you're looking to build your own container home, I want to encourage you to check out our free training. I put it together for you. It's an hour long, and it's a workshop going over how we do what we do. So if you've ever been interested in building a container home, we give you tools, resources, recommendations on there for how you can build your home a lot quicker and save up to 30% on your material costs. So you don't want to miss that. The link for that is in the description below, and I'll see you on the next video.